So first off, before we get into the upsets, do you think Carolina should have got in the tournament?
No, it's because I'm a Duke fan. They shouldn't have got into the tournament, bro.
I don't even feel like it's because I'm a Duke fan. I just feel like they didn't do enough to get in the tournament. Like had they beat us and went to the ACC championship, I feel like they're a lot. Because they lost, I think that there were some teams that were more deserving of getting in. I was really surprised to see Carolina make the tournament. So it'll be interesting to see what they do against San Diego State. I got Carolina winning that game. I think they'll beat San Diego State. Um, yeah, I'm not too worried about them winning that game, but by winning that game tomorrow, they'll have to play Ole Miss, and I think that's the end of their tournament run at that point. So we got to pick an upset or a game at least to watch out for in each bracket. What are some of the games you think we need to take a look at? And I'll tell you mine as well.
I'm gonna go. This may not be a really big upset if you ask me, but I'm gonna go to the East, and I'm looking at the Oregon and Liberty matchup. Oregon and Liberty matchup.
Oregon to win that game. I think Oregon has played pretty solid this year. They played in a jam-packed Big Ten. The Big Ten was super competitive. I think Oregon will pull that one out. The game I do want to have an eye on is the 14-3 matchup. Montana taking on Wisconsin. Wisconsin has been a team that, again, played in the Big Ten, solid conference. I would say probably maybe the third best basketball conference or second. You could argue between the Big Ten and the Big 12, with the SEC being the best basketball conference this past year and setting a record, by the way. We're going to get to that. But the SEC putting 14 teams into the NCAA tournament is crazy. That's crazy work. Shout out to SEC. But I got Montana taking out Wisconsin, 14 seed over the 3 seed as the matchup to look out for.
I think the SEC gets a bad, not necessarily a bad rap, but there's this heavy focus on football that people think that the SEC doesn't have really good basketball schools. That's not necessarily true. The SEC every year they have at least 4 solid teams that are highly competitive in that top 10. So I mean, ACC, that's where our heart lies. The ACC, in our opinion, is probably the best basketball conference, but SEC is pretty competitive as well.
Yeah, for sure. And also a game I took a look at and I said, speaking of the SEC, I got to add this in. Vanderbilt, the number 10 seed over St. Mary's, the number 7 seed. Vanderbilt has played well all season. They've got some veteran players that transferred in and have been a part of that team. Don't let the record fool you. A 20-12 record in the SEC could be a 24-8 record in another conference. The SEC was that competitive, so don't let the record fool you. Vanderbilt is a much better team than St. Mary's. I don't think, to me, it's not even an upset if Vanderbilt coming in as a 10 seed out of that SEC knocks off the 7 seed St. Mary's. Look out for that game. Is the West bracket, if I'm not mistaken, with Florida at the 1 seed. My bracket isn't labeled. Sorry about that. But 11 seed Drake knocking off number 6 Missouri. Now, mind you, I mentioned how good the SEC is. I mentioned Vanderbilt and what I think they'll do with St. Mary's. I think this is going the other way. Drake has been a team that's been in the NCAA tournament over the past couple of years. Their conference is very competitive. Drake and Bradley really fight it out for this conference every year. If you ask me, Bradley should have been in the tournament. But again, some of these smaller conferences, you're only guaranteed to get in if you win that conference title. But Drake and Bradley were the number 1 and number 2 seed in their conference. Drake won that matchup. They're coming in. They're a physical team. They've got experience being in the tournament. I think they knock off Missouri in the 11-6 matchup.
Looking at it in the West, I might be wild. I don't know much about this school, but I just had this visceral feeling when I looked at the matchup. St. John's and Omaha. Is it Omaha?
Yeah, Omaha.
I mean, they're on a 6-game winning streak, right? You know, 7 is a lucky number. So I think I got St. John's being upset about Omaha, man.
I After St. John's won the Big East and the way they play all season, I think St. John's going to make a deep run into the tournament.
Okay.
I think this is one of those brackets when you look at this region where you could very well, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, see the number one and the number two seed facing off in the Elite Eight in Florida taking on St. John's. I definitely think this happens here and is more likely to happen here than in any of the other brackets. I definitely see Florida taking on St. John's. And I would say Florida's going to win that game. They're a high-powered offense. They show what type of team they are in winning the SEC over Tennessee. I got Florida going to the Final Four coming out of the West.
Okay.
Bouncing back to, I think this is, again, looking at where I think the brackets is, because mine isn't labeled. Houston, I would assume, is the number one seed in the South. I like High Point. Am I correct on that, Dub?
Midwest.
Midwest. I like the 13 seed High Point to knock off number 4 Purdue. Now, Purdue played again in a jam-packed Big Ten, a lot of great basketball teams in the Big Ten, but Purdue showed me that, again, they have a prolific point guard. They have some role players, but they struggled at times when I watched them in the Big Ten tournament. I think Purdue is going to have their hands full with a High Point team that looked very, very explosive when I watched them play in their conference championship. I think High Point at that 13 seed can knock off number 4 Purdue. And then Troy, Kentucky might be a game to watch out for. Kentucky's had a lot of injuries. Their point guard has been hurt. I'm not sure if he's going to be playing in this first round. But that 14-3, I'm not going to call that an upset, but I would just say watch out for it with Kentucky. I know Kentucky has the big name. They're the 3 seed. They are a great basketball team that played in the SEC, but Troy has an opportunity to make that game interesting.
Yeah, I like that upset alert for Purdue on High Point. I've been able to catch out. Not catch out. I've been able to catch a few highlights from High Point University's men's basketball team just for the simple fact that it's practically in my backyard. And one of my good buddies, one of my brothers actually, I would call him a brother almost. CJ McGill, man. He does a lot of videography for them, photography for them, and I'm able to see highlights of the High Point Panthers men's basketball team through him. And I like a lot of the things that I see just from the highlights now. Just from the highlights, I haven't watched the game. I'm not saying that I watched the game, but I like what I see from them guys. So I can't see that being an upset for sure in the Midwest region.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to go one more in the Midwest to add on to it. Utah State, UCLA. Utah State, again, a lot of folks are always focused on those, Power 5 conferences. When it comes to the NCAA tournament, there are other conferences that field really solid basketball teams. And Utah State is one of those teams. I've seen them play a couple times this season. They're a team that can put points on the board. UCLA, to me, was hit and miss in the Big Ten. Again, Big Ten being one of those top conferences, so being competitive in the conference definitely earns you a spot in the tournament. But I think Utah State could pull the upset against UCLA. I think that's definitely a game to look out for.
And what I like about sports, baseball, basketball, golf, softball, sports like that, and you talk about the big Power 5 schools, and you talk about the smaller conferences. Once you go on that court, man, y'all all in the same playing field. There may be a slight difference in the talent pool, but when it comes to like strategy and the execution, the game plan, it's a lot more competitive in those sports as opposed to football, right? That's why when you play Power Five schools, you have a small school like UNC Charlotte. It just doesn't work out well for the most part. You just don't have the resources. You don't have the size. You don't have those caliber of athletes. With those sports that I mentioned, basketball, track, whatever, level playing field, uber competitive. That's what I like about March Madness, because any given team on any given Saturday, Friday, any day of the week can win. So that's why a lot of people like watching basketball during this time.
For sure, for sure. And I think we talked about everything except for maybe the South with Auburn as the number one seed. So I've got a couple games there as well. The first matchup is the 13-4 matchup with Yale and Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a great basketball team. They played well in the SEC. They knocked off Alabama. They beat Auburn. A very, very solid basketball team. They should win this game, but after watching Yale play in the Ivy League championship, I really like the way this team. Something about the team. The point guard, I think his name is Mbing, is dominant. Kind of reminds me of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, similar build to him. This team has a 7-footer who can move on the floor. I saw him catch a couple alleys. Again, they're playing in the Ivy League, but they have a great basketball coach, a well-coached team, a team that can bring some problems to Texas A&M. So I will put them on upset alert. And then I got to go with the 10-7 matchup, New Mexico taking on Marquette. To me, Marquette has been up and down throughout the season. Now, they did play in the Big East. The Big East is a very tough basketball conference with teams like St. John's, UConn, Xavier, that'll all be in the tournament as well. But I think that New Mexico could pull the upset, knock off Marquette for a win in that 10-7 matchup, which is something that we see quite often in that matchup. So those are my upsets. Any games look like, a team should be on upset alert to you, Dub?
I don't have any, bro.
Okay.
Not in that region. I don't have any.
Okay, so let's run it down. We already went through the upsets quickly. Who do you have in your Final Four?
Of course, I'm gonna say Duke. Duke in the East, Michigan State in the South. I'm gonna go UConn West, and I'm gonna go Illinois in the Midwest. That's random.
Okay, I'm gonna go Duke, Final Four, Auburn in the Final Four. I'm gonna go Florida beating St. John's in their Elite Eight matchup to go to the Final Four. And then I've got to go now. Tennessee Houston that's a tough choice to make between two teams. Houston can really run the floor, put points up. Tennessee is a very defensive-minded team, tends to play in lower scoring games. I'm going to take Zakai Zibler and the Tennessee Volunteers and knock off Houston and make it to the Final Four. And then I got Duke over Tennessee, and I got Florida over Auburn. Duke versus Florida in my national championship. And I ain't going to say who I got winning because you follow us, you already know.
Yep.